He told her he was stuck in emergency surgery. He said it in the warm, steady voice she had trusted for 10 years, the voice that made patients feel safe and made his wife believe every lie he had ever told. He said it while standing 60 feet below her in the same airport, his hand on another woman's waist, pulling a rose-gold suitcase toward the check-in counter with the lazy confidence of a man who believed he would never be caught. His wife was watching from the glass corridor above. She could see the top of his head, the charcoal sport coat she had bought him, the blonde woman laughing beside him. She could see his mother behind them, holding 2 boarding passes and adjusting her sunglasses. She could see his sister taking a selfie with 2 children in matching backpacks. The entire Mercer family was going on vacation. Every single one of them, except the woman who had spent a decade managing their lives, organizing their holidays, funding their lifestyle, and keeping their world from falling apart. That woman was Cassandra Whitfield. And Cassandra Whitfield was not who any of them thought she was. Part 1. The fortune no one knew. Cassandra Whitfield was born in a money so old it did not need to announce itself. Her grandfather, Arthur Whitfield, built one of the largest private equity firms on the eastern seaboard. Her father expanded it into international real estate. By the time Cassandra turned 18, the family trust was worth north of $400 million, and her personal share, held in a blind trust managed by a team of attorneys she had known since childhood, generated enough passive income annually to buy a house every quarter without noticing. Nobody knew this. That was by design. Cassandra had watched wealth destroy every relationship around her. Her father's first marriage collapsed when her mother discovered that every friend, every lover, every smiling face at every party wanted something from the Whitfield name. Her older brother married a woman who spent 3 years performing devotion before filing for divorce and walking away with $11 million. Her college roommate stopped speaking to her the semester Cassandra made the mistake of paying for a spring break trip and saw the way it changed the texture of every conversation afterward. By 24, Cassandra had made a decision. She would live below her means. She would work a normal job. She would drive a normal car, rent a normal apartment, wear normal clothes. She would find someone who loved her for the woman she was, not the fortune she sat on. She would test the theory that real love could exist without the gravity of money bending everything toward itself. She took a position as an operations coordinator at a logistics firm in Philadelphia. Decent salary, nothing remarkable. She told no one about the trust. She dressed like a woman who budgeted carefully because she did budget carefully as a discipline, as a disguise, as a test that she ran every single day against every person who entered her life. She met Dr. Nathan Mercer at a dinner party when she was 26. He was a second-year surgical resident with a square jaw, a confident handshake, and the particular charisma of a man who saved lives and expected to be admired for it. He was charming. He was self-assured. He talked about himself with the fluency of someone who had never found a more interesting subject. Cassandra watched him from across the table. She was not dazzled. She was assessing. She had been assessing people her whole life, separating the genuine from the performed, the real from the transactional. Nathan was neither brilliant nor mediocre. He was adequate, wrapped in good lighting, but he was also kind at night. When the host's elderly mother struggled with the front steps, Nathan took her arm without being asked. When the conversation turned to hospital politics, he spoke about his patients, not his procedures. When he walked Cassandra to her car at the end of the evening, he asked her what she thought about a book she had mentioned, and he listened to the answer. He listened. That was what got her. Not the jaw, not the scrubs, the listening. Because Cassandra had spent her whole life being heard by people who were actually listening for her net worth, and Nathan, who did not know her net worth, simply listened to her. They dated for a year. Cassandra paid attention. She watched how Nathan treated waiters, how he handled frustration, how he spoke about women who were not in the room. He passed every test. Not perfectly, but genuinely enough. She let herself believe. They married when she was 28. Small ceremony. Cassandra organized everything. Nathan's contribution was showing up and smiling for photographs. She filed that observation away and chose not to examine it. Part 2. The invisible architecture. The first 5 years followed a pattern that Cassandra recognized with the clinical precision of someone who had studied human behavior the way her family studied balance sheets. She managed everything. Nathan managed nothing. She paid the mortgage from her salary. She could have paid it from the trust in a single wire transfer, but that was not the point. The point was the test. The ongoing, daily, decade-long test of whether the man she married would step up, show up, contribute. Whether he saw her as a partner or service. She managed the household accounts, the utilities, the insurance, the property taxes. She scheduled the furnace inspections, the gutter cleanings, the pest control visits. She handled the veterinary appointments for their golden retriever, Rosie, whom Nathan had wanted and Cassandra fed, walked, bathed, and medicated. She planned every holiday meal. She sent birthday cards to Nathan's family, signed with both their names. She tracked his continuing education credits. She remembered the names of hospital administrators' spouses and sent congratulations when their children graduated. She ran the social machinery of his career while he performed the surgery and collected the applause. Nathan never once asked how any of it worked. He lived inside the result the way a guest lives inside a hotel, enjoying the clean sheets without wondering who changed them. When their daughter, Sophie, was born in year 4, Cassandra took 3 months off and returned to work with the baby in daycare and the household still running flawlessly. When their son, Oliver, arrived 2 years later, she took 4 months and came back to discover that Nathan had not once in her absence learned which pediatrician to call in an emergency. She documented everything. Not for a divorce. Not yet. Out of habit. Cassandra Whitfield had grown up in a family where documentation was instinct, where every transaction was recorded, every agreement memorialized, every handshake backed by paper. She kept meticulous records of every household expense she paid, every system she managed, every bill she handled alone. Not because she planned to use them, because she was her father's daughter, and her father never made a move without a file. The trust remained untouched. The attorney sent quarterly reports that Cassandra reviewed on her laptop at 2 in the morning after the children were asleep. The money grew. The test continued, and Nathan, who believed his wife earned $58,000 a year and clipped coupons because she had to, never once suspected that the woman doing his laundry controlled more wealth than his entire hospital. Part 3. The mother-in-law. Diane Mercer was the kind of woman who weaponized warmth. She hugged you while placing the knife, and by the time you felt the sting, she was already smiling and pouring tea. She visited every 6 weeks. Cassandra prepared for each visit with exhausting precision. The house was spotless. Diane's preferred brand of herbal tea was stocked. The guest towels were the monogrammed linen ones Diane had mentioned admiring 3 years ago. Every detail curated, every effort invisible. Diane never acknowledged any of it. You keep a tidy home, Cassandra. I always say, a well-kept house makes up for a lot of things. The sentence hung in the air, the second half unspoken but understood. Makes up for the fact that you are not what I wanted for my son. The exclusion was methodical. A family group text Cassandra was not added to until she asked, then was added to but never tagged in. A birthday dinner for Diane that Cassandra learned about the night before. A Thanksgiving planning call that happened while Cassandra was putting the children to bed. The results presented to her as decisions already made. We were just discussing family things, Diane would say when Cassandra walked into a room that went quiet. You know how it is. Nathan's younger sister, Brooke, reinforced the hierarchy with a smirk disguised as affection. She called Cassandra Princess, in a tone that was not quite mockery and never quite warmth. Princess Cassandra has everything under control as usual, Brooke would announce, dropping her coat on the chair Cassandra had just straightened. I honestly do not know how you do it all. Cassandra knew exactly how she did it. She did it by doing it, invisibly, thanklessly, endlessly, while 3 adults watched and contributed nothing and called her controlling for keeping the engine running. She brought it up to Nathan once. Once. I feel excluded from your family's decisions. It has been happening consistently. Nathan looked at her with the expression she had categorized years ago, the look of a man being handed a problem he had no intention of solving. You are being too sensitive, Cass. That is just how they are. Cassandra did not raise it again. She filed the conversation in the same mental cabinet where she filed everything else. And the cabinet grew heavier, and the woman carrying it grew quieter, and the quietness was mistaken for acceptance when it was actually arithmetic. Part 4. The airport. Cassandra had been in Denver for 8 days. Corporate training. 8 days of workshops in hotel rooms and dinners alone, and the strange, guilty relief of existing in a space where no one needed anything from her. She called Nathan every evening. He answered most of the time. He sounded normal. He mentioned the children. He said his mother was helping out. He said everything was fine. On the last night, she confirmed her flight. "I'll land at 1:40. Terminal C. I will be there." Sophie has been counting the days. Her flight landed 9 minutes early. She texted Nathan from the gate. No reply. She called from baggage claim. Voicemail. She called again from the arrivals exit. He picked up on the 5th ring. "Baby, I am so sorry. Got pulled into an emergency surgery. You know how it is. Grab an Uber and I will make it up to you tonight." His voice was fluent and practiced. Not the voice of a man in crisis. The voice of a man performing a script he had rehearsed. Cassandra stood in the arrivals hall with her navy blue suitcase. She did not respond immediately. She listened to the ambient sound behind his voice. No hospital PA system. No beeping monitors. She heard the low hum of a large public space and the distant chime of a departure announcement. He was at the airport. She was at the airport. He was lying. "Okay," she said. She hung up. She walked toward the rideshare pickup, which required crossing through the elevated glass corridor connecting the arrival and departure terminals. She was halfway across when she looked down through the glass wall at the departures check-in area below. There he was, Nathan Mercer, in the charcoal sport coat she had bought him for their anniversary. Hair freshly cut, no scrubs, no hospital badge, standing at the airline counter with his hand on the small of a woman's back. The woman was blonde, early 30s, wearing a white sundress and sandals. She was laughing. Her rose gold suitcase was on the conveyor belt. Nathan was handing the agent 2 passports. Behind them stood Diane, pulling a small rolling bag, wearing resort linen and an expression of relaxed pleasure that Cassandra had never once seen directed at her. Beside Diane was Brooke, holding an iced coffee, scrolling her phone. And behind Brooke, 2 children in matching backpacks. Brooke's kids. The whole family was there. The whole family. Going somewhere warm. Together. Without Cassandra. She stood at the glass for 5 minutes. She watched Nathan lean down and kiss the blonde woman on the mouth. She watched him laugh at something Diane said. She watched Brooke take a group photo at the gate. She watched all of it with the absolute stillness of a woman performing calculations that would determine the rest of several people's lives. She did not cry. She did not shake. Something moved behind her eyes that was not pain and not rage. It was something far older and far more dangerous. It was the thing that happens when a woman who has been pretending to be small remembers exactly how large she is. She picked up her phone. She did not take a photograph. She called a number she had not dialed in years. "Gerald," she said. "It is Cassandra. I need you to activate the discretionary fund. Full authority. And I need a meeting with the real estate team by Monday morning." Gerald Ashton had been the chief counsel of the Whitfield Family Trust for 22 years. He did not ask questions. He never did. "Of course, Cassandra. Welcome back." Part 5. The Confrontation. Nathan returned 5 days later. Tanned. Relaxed. Smelling like sunscreen and the particular smugness of a man who believed his deception was airtight. He walked into the kitchen at 8 in the evening. The children were already in bed. Cassandra was sitting at the table with a cup of tea and a folder. She had been waiting, not nervously, the way a chess player waits for an opponent to make the move she predicted 6 turns ago. "There you are." Nathan opened the refrigerator, took out a beer, leaned against the counter. "How was Denver?" "Informative," Cassandra said. "How was surgery?" "Rough week. 3 major cases. I am wiped." "Which days?" The beer paused halfway to his mouth. "What? Which days were the major cases?" "You always tell me the days because you track your hours." A beat of silence. One beat too long. "I do not remember exactly. Thursday, I think. Maybe Tuesday." Cassandra set down her tea. She opened the folder. Inside was a single page. A flight manifest, obtained through channels that a woman with $400 million and a team of attorneys has access to. Nathan Mercer. Seat 4A. Destination, Turks and Caicos. Passenger beside him. Seat 4B. A woman named Amber Langley. She placed it on the table and turned it to face him. Nathan looked at the paper. His expression traveled from confusion to recognition to fear in under 3 seconds. "I was in the corridor above the departures terminal," Cassandra said. Her voice was even, controlled. The voice of a woman who had spent 10 years managing her tone and was now using that skill for a very different purpose. I watch you check in. I watch you hand over 2 passports. I watch your mother standing behind you with a boarding pass. I watched Brooke taking photographs. I watched you kiss her at the gate. In the charcoal coat I bought you for our anniversary. The kitchen was silent. Rosie was asleep in her bed by the back door. The house ticked and settled the way old houses do. Cassandra, I can explain. No, you cannot, but I can. She pulled a second document from the folder, then a third, then a fourth. Credit card statements highlighting dinners for 2 at restaurant Cassandra had never been to. A hotel booking in Boston on a weekend Nathan had claimed he was at a conference. A jewelry purchase, $600, dated 2 weeks before Cassandra's birthday, a birthday on which she received nothing. She laid them out one by one. Nathan watched with the face of a man watching the walls of his house come down and realizing he does not know how to build walls. This has been going on for at least 16 months, Cassandra said. The financial trail is very clear. You are not a careful man, Nathan. You never have been. You have simply been married to a woman who was careful enough for both of you. Nathan set the beer on the counter. His hands were shaking. It was a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. It was 16 months of mistakes, Nathan. That is not a mistake. That is a second life. She closed the folder. She placed her hands flat on the table. She looked at him, and for the first time in 10 years, she let him see her without the mask. Not the quiet wife. Not the efficient manager. Not the woman who absorbed and adjusted and smiled through her own erasure. She let him see the woman underneath. The one who had been running calculations since the day she stood at that glass wall. The one whose silence had never been weakness. I want a divorce, she said. The paperwork will be filed Monday. You can stay in the guest room until the process begins. After that, you will need to make other arrangements. Cassandra, we have 2 children. We can work through this. We have 2 children. That is the only reason this conversation is happening at a kitchen table instead of through attorneys. She stood. She picked up the folder. She walked toward the stairs. Cass, wait. Please. I will end it with her. Tonight. I will call her right now. Cassandra stopped at the doorway. She did not turn around. You should know something, Nathan, before you start planning your next move. She turned her head, just enough for him to see her profile. I am not the woman you think I am. I have never been the woman you think I am. She walked upstairs. She closed the bedroom door. She sat on the edge of the bed, and she breathed for 30 seconds with her eyes closed. Then she opened her laptop and sent 3 emails. 1 to Gerald, 1 to her personal accountant, 1 to a real estate acquisitions team she had not used in years. The game had started, and Nathan did not even know what board they were playing on. Part 6. The Unveiling. The divorce filing hit Nathan like a freight train he did not see because he had never once bothered to look at the tracks. But the filing was only the surface. Underneath it, Cassandra Whitfield was doing what Whitfields do. She was restructuring. The first move was the house. The house they lived in, a 4-bedroom colonial in a good neighborhood, had a mortgage in both their names. What Nathan did not know was that the down payment had come from a personal account Cassandra held separately, funded by a fraction of her trust income. She had documentation. Her attorneys filed a motion establishing her disproportionate financial contribution to the property. The motion landed on Nathan's lawyer's desk, like a brick through a window. The second move was the hospital. Cassandra did not attack Nathan's career directly. She did something quieter and more devastating. Through the Whitfield Foundation, a philanthropic arm she had kept dormant during her marriage, she made a significant donation to the hospital where Nathan worked. The donation funded a new surgical wing and came with a naming condition: the Whitfield Surgical Center. Her name, on the building where her husband operated. It was not revenge. It was visibility. After 10 years of being invisible in every room Nathan occupied, her name was now on the wall he walked past every morning. The hospital administration was ecstatic. They held a press event. Local media covered it. Nathan stood in the hallway of the new wing and stared at the brass letters on the wall and felt something he had never felt before in his marriage. He felt small. His colleagues began asking questions. Whitfield, like the Whitfield Group, is it your wife's family? Nathan had no answers because Nathan had never asked. He had been married to the heir of a $400 million trust for 10 years and had never once thought to wonder why his wife, who supposedly earned $58,000 a year, never seemed stressed about money. The third move was the real one. Nathan's real estate ambitions, such as they were, depended on a development deal he had been chasing for 2 years. A mixed-use property in the downtown corridor. His investment group had pooled capital and was waiting on a final parcel to complete the acquisition. The parcel was held by a holding company. The holding company was owned by a trust. The trust was managed by Gerald Ashton. The property belonged to Cassandra. She did not sell it to Nathan's group. She did not block the sale, either. She simply let it sit. Unanswered emails. Unreturned calls. The deal stalled. Nathan's partners grew restless. The investment group began to fracture. Nathan poured hours into salvaging it, unaware that the obstacle he could not move was his own wife. Sitting in a brownstone apartment 6 miles away, drinking coffee on a balcony lined with rosemary, reviewing his offer and choosing not to respond. She never told him. She did not need to. The point was not cruelty. The point was a correction. For 10 years, Nathan had treated Cassandra's competence as a convenience and her presence as optional. Now her absence was an obstacle he could not overcome, and her presence, her real presence, the Whitfield name on the surgical wing, the Whitfield trust holding the property he needed, was everywhere he looked. Part 7. The collapse. The domestic implosion was almost too predictable. Without Cassandra, the household disintegrated within weeks. The internet went down because the account was in her name. The mortgage payment bounced because Nathan did not know the login. The lawn grew wild. The dog's vet appointment was missed. The furnace filter was not changed. The property tax deadline passed unnoticed. The home insurance lapsed. Nathan called Cassandra 6 times in the first month asking for passwords, account numbers, and the name of the pest control company. She answered each question once, clearly and without emotion, the way you read instructions to someone assembling furniture for the first time. Then she stopped answering. Diane arrived to help. She lasted 2 weeks. She discovered, in those 2 weeks, the full scope of what Cassandra had been doing for a decade, the systems, the schedules, the invisible maintenance of an entire household. She called Brooke in a voice Brooke later described as rattled. She was running everything, Brooke. Everything. I did not know. She was always a bit of control freak, Mom. No. She was the only competent person in this family, and we treated her like the help. It was the first honest thing Diane Mercer had said about Cassandra in 10 years. But it came too late, and it was spoken to the wrong person, and it changed nothing. Amber Langley lasted 4 months. She had fallen for Nathan Mercer, the version of Nathan Mercer that Cassandra had built. The surgeon with the organized life, the clean house, the well-managed finances, the polished social calendar. When the real Nathan emerged, the one who could not find the water shutoff valve, who burned pasta, who forgot parent-teacher conferences, who had late notices piling on the kitchen counter, Amber looked at the mess and saw the truth. She had not fallen in love with a man. She had fallen in love with another woman's engineering, and the engineer had left the building. Amber left on a Thursday. She took her rose gold suitcase and her French moisturizer, and she walked out of the house that was falling apart and did not look back. Nathan sat on the couch that evening with a bourbon and a stack of overdue bills and the realization, dim and humiliating, that the woman he had dismissed as controlling was the only reason any of his life had ever worked. Part 8. The Queen. Cassandra moved into a brownstone in the Arts District 3 weeks after the filing. Not a rental, a purchase. For bedrooms, hardwood floors, a private garden, a rooftop terrace with a view of the river. She bought it through the trust, outright, in cash. It was the first time in 10 years she had used her own money to build something for herself. The children loved it. Sophie claimed the bedroom with the window seat. Oliver claimed the garden, which he declared was the domain of Rosie and no one else. The dogs seemed to agree. Cassandra returned to work, but not to the logistics firm. She stepped into the role she had been born to and had spent a decade hiding from. She joined the board of the Whitfield Foundation. She began managing a portfolio of philanthropic investments in education and women's shelters. She used the operational skills she had honed running a household to run a charitable organization with a 7-figure annual budget, and she was, unsurprisingly, exceptional at it. The media picked up the story in fragments. The Whitfield name resurfaced. A profile in a business magazine described Cassandra as a returning figure in East Coast philanthropy. The profile mentioned her divorce in one sentence and spent 3 pages on her work. The photograph showed her on the rooftop of the brownstone with the river behind her, wearing a simple navy dress, her posture straight, her expression calm, her eyes carrying the particular clarity of a woman who has stopped pretending to be less than she is. Nathan saw the profile. Brooke sent it to him. He read it on his phone, sitting in the kitchen of the house he could no longer maintain, surrounded by dishes he had not washed and mail he had not opened, and he read every word twice. He did not recognize her, not the clothes or the setting. Those were new. What he did not recognize was the scale, the foundation, the trust, the wealth, the name on the surgical wing where he worked every day. He had been married to one of the wealthiest women in the state, and he had never known because he had never looked. He had been too busy being admired to notice who was holding him up. Part 9. The Reckoning. The call came on a Sunday evening in November. Cassandra was on her rooftop terrace. The children were asleep. Rosie was beside her chair. The city glittered below like a circuit board. Her phone buzzed. She let it ring 4 times. Cassandra. Nathan's voice was different now. The confidence was gone. The performance was gone. What remained was the voice of a man, standing in the wreckage of a life he had never learned to build. Nathan, I need to see you. Not through lawyers. In person. Please. There is nothing to discuss in person. I know about the trust. I know about the foundation. I know who your family is. A pause. Cassandra looked at the river. You know now, she said. You did not know for 10 years. Because you never asked. You never asked about my family. You never asked about my finances. You never asked how the mortgage was paid, or how the household ran, or why a woman who earned $58,000 a year never once worried about money. You never asked because you were not interested in me. You were interested in what I provided. That is not fair. It is precisely fair. You had 10 years to be curious about your own wife. You spent those years complaining that I was controlling while living inside a life I controlled. You spent those years letting your mother exclude me, letting your sister mock me, and letting another woman into our bed. And now you are calling because you Googled my last name and discovered the number attached to it. Silence on the line. My mother wants to apologize. Your mother wants access. That is not the same thing. She spent 10 years treating me like the hired help. She does not get to renegotiate the terms now that she has seen the balance sheet. Brooke asked if you would be willing to connect her with some of your foundation contacts. She is looking to start a nonprofit. Cassandra almost smiled. It was the kind of smile that never reaches the mouth, the kind that lives entirely behind the eyes. Brooke, who had called her princess for a decade, who had dropped coats on chairs Cassandra straightened and eaten meals Cassandra cooked without once offering to wash a dish, was now asking for professional favors from the woman she had mocked. Tell Brooke that the foundation's contact information is on our website. She can apply through the standard process like everyone else. Cassandra, please. I am losing the house. The Briar Creek deal fell through. My partners pulled out. I cannot get the financing without that downtown parcel, and the holding company will not return my calls. Cassandra set her coffee down. She let the silence stretch for 5 full seconds. She wanted him to sit inside it. The holding company will not return your calls, Nathan, because the holding company is me. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Cassandra had ever heard. That parcel has been in my family's portfolio for 12 years. You have been trying to buy a piece of property from your own wife. And you did not know, because you never once in 10 years of marriage asked me a single meaningful question about who I am. She heard him breathing, uneven, shallow. I'm not going to sell you the parcel. I'm not going to block it forever, either. I will sell it at fair market value to a buyer who qualifies. If your group can restructure and meet the terms, you are welcome to bid. But you will not receive special treatment. You will not receive a discount. And you will not receive a phone call. She paused. You call me princess through your sister. You call me controlling to your mother. You call me sensitive when I ask to be included. You treated me like the floor you walked on and never once looked down to see who was holding you up. Her voice did not rise. It carried across the night air with the weight of 10 years and $400 million, and a woman who had chosen to be small and was now choosing to be exactly her size. I hid my fortune because I wanted to be loved for myself. I found out I was not loved at all. That is the answer to the question you never thought to ask. She ended the call. She set the phone on the table. She picked up her coffee and drank it slowly, looking at the city she had quietly owned pieces of for her entire adult life, the city her husband had tried to build a career in without ever realizing he was building it underground. Part 10. The Deletion. On a Tuesday night in December, 1 year after the airport, Cassandra sat on her rooftop terrace wrapped in a blue cashmere blanket she had bought herself the week she moved in. It was the first expensive thing she had purchased openly, without disguise, without apology. It cost $600 and she did not clip a coupon for it, and she did not feel guilty. She opened her phone. She scrolled to a folder she had created the night of the airport. Not photographs. Documents. The credit card statements. The hotel bookings. The flight manifest. The jewelry receipt. The entire architecture of evidence she had built with the same precision she brought to everything. She looked at it for a long time. The evidence had served its purpose. The divorce was finalized. Custody was settled. The house was sold. The parcel was under contract to a qualified buyer who was not Nathan. The foundation was thriving. The children were safe and growing and learning what it looked like when a woman built a life with her own hands and her own name. She selected the folder. She pressed delete. The phone asked her to confirm. She confirmed. The folder vanished. The screen returned to her camera roll. Recent photographs filled the screen. Sophie on the garden swing. Oliver covered in finger paint, grinning. Rosie asleep in a patch of sunlight on the hardwood floor. The rooftop terrace at sunset. A selfie with her brother at a foundation gala, both of them laughing. The brass nameplate on the surgical wing, Whitfield, catching the morning light through the hospital's glass doors. She closed the phone. She sat on the table. She thought about the airport, not the betrayal, the glass corridor. The moment she stood above the departures terminal and watched her husband's lie laid out beneath her like a blueprint, and instead of breaking, instead of screaming, instead of pressing her face against the glass and shattering, she had picked up the phone and called Gerald. She had activated the trust. She had stepped back into the life she was born to, not out of revenge, but out of recognition. The recognition that the woman she had been pretending to be was smaller than the woman she actually was, and the pretending had not protected her. It had only made her invisible to the people she was trying to love. She was not invisible anymore. She was Cassandra Whitfield. Her name was on buildings. Her money moved markets. Her children slept safely in a brownstone she owned outright. Her dog was at her feet. Her garden was growing. Her foundation was funding shelters for women who had been made to feel small by men who needed them to stay that way. She had tested love against anonymity and found that love without curiosity is not love at all. It is consumption. Nathan had consumed her labor for 10 years without once wondering about the woman performing it. Diane had consumed her hospitality. Brooke had consumed her effort. Amber had consumed the residue. All of them had eaten at a table Cassandra built and never once looked up to thank the architect. The architect was home now, in her own house, on her own terrace, under her own name. The rosemary on the railing rustled in the December wind. The city hummed below. A plane crossed overhead, its lights blinking against the dark, heading somewhere warm, carrying passengers who might or might not be lying to someone on the phone. Cassandra watched it pass. She pulled the blanket tighter. She breathed in the cold air and the rosemary and the particular, irreplaceable silence of a woman who no longer needs to pretend to be anything other than exactly what she is. Some women leave quietly. Some women leave loudly. Cassandra Whitfield left precisely. She dismantled the lie with the same meticulous care she had used to build the life. And when it was done, she did not look back. She did not need to. The view from where she was sitting was better. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and turn on notifications. We tell stories about people who discover what they are really worth. The next one is already on its way.